Hi, I'm Jane, and together with Jodes, we are two proud feminists passionate about female empowerment. This podcast is our take on the real conversations, real issues, and real challenges we must stay focused on if we're going to inspire the next generation of female leaders, managers, and entrepreneurs to pick up the baton and continue the journey to equality. But be warned, there will be rants and the odd profanity, but mainly just lots of curious conversations, uplifting stories, great guests, and food for thought on the path we still have to travel. It is clear that our young girls need us to harness our gumption and to use our voices now to make the changes we all know need to happen. It's time to be a pioneer, not a passenger. To paraphrase the famous words of a female game changer, Hollywood's iconic Bette Davis, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Hi, everybody. So welcome to Series 3, Episode 2. And we are delighted today because we've got our first guest. We're very, very excited.
First ever.
Very excited. Very excited. So let me introduce you to our wonderful guest, Nicky Porter. She is the Chief Superintendent at Greater Manchester Police. She's also the District Commander of Rochdale area, and she's the Strategic Lead for Greater Manchester on violence against women and girls. In brackets, she's also an exhausted working mum. She would be that kind of title and work to do, isn't she? So our sort of subject, again, we're still on the same series, asking women and work, does it? And then we're specifically today talking about a very, very big subject. So I'd first just like to start by asking you, really, Nicky, women in work, does it? Does it work for you?
Well, great question, Jane. And thank you so much for inviting me to be your first guest. I'm really, really honoured. Slightly apprehensive, but very honoured.
Rubbish.
Does it work? I think I'm in a really interesting, challenging job because I'm part of a 24-hour service. So, part of policing's 999 emergency service. So it's a 24-hour commitment for the police, not for me personally, but for the police. So I think in terms of whether it works for women, I think it's got a lot better in policing because there's more women in policing. And that's that whole point, I think, about having a diverse workforce, because the more women that have come into policing, the more we've got into different roles, and the workforce has started to adapt around the requirements of women and working mums and women with carer responsibilities. So I think I'm in a profession that I've been in for a very long time where I've seen a lot of changes over the years. So it was less so when I was younger in service. It was you didn't see many women with careers in diverse roles in policing. But I have to say it has got an awful lot better. And there's a lot more flexibility around working patterns and things like that. So, but there's always more we can do, definitely.
Absolutely. And I mean, you are a big supporter of Girls Out Loud and the Big Sister program. You're just coming to the end of your journey, aren't you? And you've
Definitely.
got some amazing women. So I can see that. I can see that there's like some big stuff happening and moving because of the quality of the women that are coming onto the program. So
Yeah.
we're moving, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're moving.
We
Yeah, we're definitely moving. Okay. So the subject for today is understanding and eradicating institutionalised sexism and misogyny. And there is nobody better placed to talk about that than you, Nicky. So first question.
Yeah, I guess, I'm genuinely intrigued by this. Even away from it being a podcast kind of topic, I am genuinely interested in this because obviously this kind of stuff's on the news a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 And it just seems, well, if you watch a lot of the news or you follow any particular
Yeah.
media, what the media ends up portraying is that, sexism and misogyny is getting worse. So as a senior police officer, and I guess a few of these stories end up being in your kind of space a lot of the time.
Yeah.
What What do you think, the organisations need to do to make that work for women in the context of
Yeah.
sexism and misogyny? So I know you've probably got some lived experience in the police,
Yeah.
but then, you might look at that broader, maybe in terms of friends, family, other people's experiences. Doesn't just have to be through the lens of what it looks like in the police force.
Yeah, I just think I think the police have got really um, sort of rightly so in that space of, is it institutionalized? And I think what happens then is we get caught in the sort of semantics of what does institutionalized mean, and actually is the whole of policing sexist, racist? And for somebody who's very proud and worked really hard over 30 years, that's hard to align yourself to.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes the public want the recognition that policing understand the work that they need to do on themselves as an organisation to build trust and confidence. So I understand where some of that's coming from. And I think the danger is if you push back on it too much, you can be sort of accused of being institutionally arrogant, that you're not open to that feedback. However, I also work with, I'm responsible for a whole district, loads of young police officers that are coming into the police. And I also feel that, by saying that we're institutionally misogynist, I'm doing a lot of them a disservice who are great people. So the issue really is that we've had some of the worst misogynistic behaviours. We've had, quite frankly, vile, sort of violent criminal, high profile cases that has really caused, policing to come in under the spotlight, and rightly so. But the reality of this is society, isn't it, more broadly, and some of the work that you are doing and advocating. And I think it's the causes and consequences of misogyny that then filters out into different places and different environments. And I just think we have to be really vigilant about it, calling it out, stamping it out. And I think the police are really on that journey now. So internally, we do listening circles now with women, and try and get that lived experience. We have chief officer buy-in to, we have gold meetings, so sort of like very senior meetings where we can sort of feed back anonymously. This is some of, women's experiences. And it's about encouraging people from the minute that they come into the service to stand up and call this behaviour out, and that it's not acceptable. So I think, there's lots of debate about, is the police really macho? It's predominantly males that come in. We're the types of work that we do, where it's command and control, controlling situations.
Even the language, isn't it? Even the language is male.
Yeah.
So, command, control, power, a lot of it's so, and also I don't think the kind of how police officers are portrayed on TV helps, does it?
Like what you mean, like in drama shows?
Yeah, in drama shows, and there's always a woman dead at the beginning of every one. Seriously, always a woman. And you go, here we go again, and it's it's always kind of like the lead is generally a man with a woman helping him, and the woman solves the case, but the guy gets all the credit, and it's not. I mean, as you know, Nicky, my husband's a retired police officer. He always says that society gets the police force it deserves. Yeah. So when you were talking about that bigger society, the police is only a reflection of what's going on. You're not these unique, sort of robotic creatures, are you? You
or godly either.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or that the same society. So
Yeah, and I think that's, so some of the work that we're doing under Violence Against Women and Girls is also looking at, and some of the work that you're doing in schools and looking at toxic masculinity. And we've got a young person who's doing that in our schools locally in Rochdale. So what I'm hearing is this isn't actually unique to policing. This is a product of society, but perhaps there's something in, like you say, maybe that macho culture, maybe people, if you don't call this out and eradicate it from the moment people come in, and these are the conversations we're having, if you let that, uh, people describe it as banter, low level comments, if you don't start to call that out,
Yeah.
your microaggressions,
Yeah.
what happens is you are normalizing behavior of people that could be sexist, misogynistic, and actually that behavior will escalate. And so what one person might think is innocent banter, by not calling it out, you're almost enabling it to manifest itself potentially in its worst form. And I think that's really played out in policing. And it probably does in other areas, but we are also that agency that responds to women who are, really vulnerable, abused sexually, violently. So you need to trust the people that come in your hour of need to be ethical and not have those views and be behaving really badly. So we have got to get our own house in order.
But and this is kind of outside of I say take it outside of the police in terms of your experiences in the organisation, but for the women that you may end up helping as victims in those situations, what are some of the things that they are coming up against that mean that, in a work context, some of this stuff that starts in work as sexism and misogyny, and how's that playing out for them in their lives, i.e. to answer the question of, does women and work, does it? What's the link for people in ordinary jobs, I guess, with that? Do you end up seeing that show up with victims? Sorry,
I
publish them.
Yeah, no. I think I know what you said.
Yeah.
I think what I see really is just in policing, you see the very worst and the very best of people at times, And I think what you see around. So if you look at violence against women and girls and the types of crimes that we deal with, it makes up 25% of our overall demand on policing. So really, it's really important to sort of, everything ranging from stalking and harassment, from sexual abuse, domestic abuse. And I really think when you actually look at the behaviours that drive that and people's sort of values and beliefs, some of that really stems about attitudes just towards women, generally. And you see people that, describe their being trapped in relationships where, they feel that there's no way out. And even the emotional abuse, people get on their absolute lowest ebb and they just don't know how to get out. Their capacity to parent, their capacity to work and to live a fulfilling normal life is completely taken away from them by somebody who's, exerting that power and control. So I think those dynamics are, what we're trying to address, positively, in policing and in other areas in society. But it's got to start, hasn't it, in having these conversations and empowering girls and boys, and this isn't okay.
Yeah. So when we talk about calling it out and stepping up, we're actually, in a way, we're putting the pressure on the women to do that and the girls to do that. Do you see, how are the men responding to some of that stuff? Are they feeling attacked? Are they feeling happy that that's happening so that it can show that it's not all men are like that? Do you know what I mean? How are they feeling? Because they've come in for some serious kickback feeding, haven't they? So how are they feeling in the police at the moment?
Well, I think it's how everybody's an individual. It's how you tackle it as well, because you're asking behavioural change here, aren't you? Fundamentally about how people think, and you can join the police and think what you want. We may never know that. We may never truly know what people think and believe. but actually we've got standards in the police that you've got to adhere to. So I think that's what we've got to differentiate, to start to get rid of those poor behaviours. This is what we stand for. You start to breach this and do anything that doesn't meet our standards, we are going to say that's enough. And we're really doing that. And the types of, if there's any behaviours that would sort of be, in that realm of domestic abuse or sexist or misogynistic, we have internal complaints and discipline, and there's a massive uptick now in that being reported through and people being suspended and referred on. But I think that low level stuff, and I hate saying that low level stuff, because you know what the impact that stuff, those conversations, that language can have. But I think if you tell people off for saying things, it kind of goes underground and it can have the reverse effect. So you have to be you probably do some of this in schools, Joe. You have to be really sort of sophisticated in the way that you go about this, because ultimately you want people to shift their thinking, don't you? And to just, as an adult, have somebody to say, don't say that, you can't say that.
Yeah.
That's that back sort of narrative then about everyone's gone woke, and you get that almost polar opposites.
But you
so
also
it is
have
really complex.
People have to know that if they do something, then there's going to be some recourse, there's going to be some action, don't they? So what we see in schools a lot of the time is girls not reporting bad behaviour. They don't report aggressive behaviour. They don't report what we would see as sexism and misogyny, because they think it's normal, because it's been normalised on TV and in every soap opera they watch.
It's happening in their house. Or it's like, what's the point? Because no one's going to do anything with it.
Absolutely. And that's that, and nobody does do anything with it. So in a lot of schools, this behaviour has been normalised. And so, I say to them, but that's not a reason not to report it. Because, if you all keep reporting it, at some point there's going to be a tipping point and the school are going to have to do something. If you just now sit back and go, well, we're not bothering, miss, because, nothing happens. Boys behave like that in our school. But do you understand that behaviour is unacceptable? Well, yeah, but what we're going to do, you're going to report it. Because if you don't, they'll keep doing it.
Definitely.
And nobody knows that they're doing it. So, even if you've got to be outside the head's office 5 times a day to report that, you all have to agree that you're going to support each other and you're going to do that. And so it starts young. It starts really young that, we've normalised this violence so much, haven't we? It's just everywhere.
And it's quite interesting because we've looked at, different charities have done stuff on like a temperature gauge on misogyny. And it's really interesting on that gauge, actually, where women are in that space and how women are behave towards other women. So particularly women who might feel that this is career limiting. Am I going to get on if I say this? I'm not going to be around this because it could affect me. And so it's quite complex in different layers.
So you mean they're not calling it out? For fear of it affecting career and so on.
Potentially.
Or to even advocate for another woman that they're seeing it happen to, or a man, actually, to be able to step in and go, it's not all right to say that. That there's repercussions there, or there's a fear of repercussion, some consequence, isn't there, to doing that? And I think that's what I was trying to get at with your long-winded,
that was your long-winded question, was it?
Yeah. And I've got this great this tool that's called misogyny temperature check tool, and it's that whole range, and women actually have a role in that, in terms of covert and overt misogyny, and how we support each other and when we support each other. And so I think that's interesting in itself. And we're looking at sort of we've had some support from the College of Policing around behavioural change in this space, and there's something about, if you reward and recognise people for standing up, what you promote, you permit. So, but I think it's really interesting as to whether people will want to say, I recognise that this person's done a really good thing, whether people want to put their name to that. So I don't know where we are yet with that.
Yeah.
That in itself will tell us
Yeah.
where we are, whether people actually want to say, I'm going to put my name to rewarding or recognizing these people for doing the right thing. And that's what I mean about people sort of around this agenda. You know, they're not quite, you can be really clear about those high profile cases, can't you? Really clear that is absolutely unacceptable. But some of this lower level stuff, I think people look at themselves and think, oh, you know, where am I in this? And that's what we're going to try and eradicate, is actually this just isn't acceptable. That's what we're standing up for. And we need everybody to take that.
But you're right, because it's like knowing what that is, isn't it? Because for some women, that might just be playful banter, and I'm not saying anything about that. I'm absolutely fine. And for another woman, that might be, I feel really deeply uncomfortable about what you've just said.
Yeah.
But also, we always talk about at the end of every podcast, or one of our solutions is always sisterhood. It's always about supporting each other. But I've been in situations, I'm sure you have, and I'm sure you have, Joes, where the women in the room have not supported me.
Yeah.
And when there's been something, and sometimes it's so much easier and less conflicting and confrontational if somebody else can call something out that's just happened to you. They might say, "Whoa, hang on a minute, I don't really think that's really appropriate," you know, the way you've just spoken, Jane. But I've been in many places we don't know. And the women, they're not, it's not that they don't like me, it's that they don't even recognise that behaviour. Don't even recognise it, because again, they're so used to it, and it's so normal for the man to speak to them that way, that they don't recognise that that's not.
Like, oh yeah, well that's just John. John's always
you
like
know what
that.
John's like. You know, it doesn't mean anything. You know, and
But you know, Nicky, when you were saying actually, you know, it is about calling it out, but doing it in the right way. I think for a lot of people, both men and women, who know it's, you know, when they're sitting in a situation and they're like, oh God, this isn't all right. I know I should say something, but I don't know what. And you were saying actually sometimes if we call it out, we send them the other way, they go even worse and it all gets a bit woke. Do you have any kind of advice to maybe the women who, and the odd man or two that might be listening? To how do you do that then in a way that moves it forward in, you know, in the direction we'd like to see it? I don't expect like a silver bullet or an overnight fix, but what?
I am. I'm looking for one. I'm looking for one of them.
Got a silver bullet.
Bring it on.
I think thinking, what's the way to go about it that's helpful?
Well, I think I'm in a position of influence, so I've got a responsibility to do something. So I think it's relevant to what you can influence as well, and not to be too judgy about that, because I think that can put too much pressure on people. But I'm certainly here in a policing context, anybody who's a supervisor has got a position of influence and a responsibility to move this agenda forward. And so I wouldn't find it excusable in any shape or form if a young student officer was experiencing something and went to a supervisor and nothing was done. So there's a line in the sand for me. If you've got a position of influence, you've got to use that for good, and it's incumbent upon you. And there's no sort of, well, I didn't feel comfortable. You've got to do that. That's part of your role. But I think if you're not in a position where that is incumbent on your role, I think there's things like, so what we've done is we've got anonymous lines where you can, so sometimes you need to triangulate information. So like you said, oh, that's just John, that's the way he is. Well, it could be that somebody new to the organisation thinks, well, actually, John's really out of touch and he shouldn't be doing this. So we've got a line where you can put that in, and then you can sort of look at that information and then actually sit down and have a conversation with somebody and say, listen, and it depends what that, if that behaviour's against our, I'm talking in a police context, against our code, it's a criminal offence, then there's only one way we're dealing with it. But if it's that lower level stuff, it is about trying to be inclusive and asking people to reflect on the impact of their behaviour and giving people a bridge to which to withdraw, you know. So if you're really telly off and sort of you're wrong, I'm right, I think you get into defensive sort of conversations. But by a P, and I think you get a sense when you speak to somebody like that.
Yeah, because the
Are you
intention
aware?
might be right, the intention might be fine,
Yeah,
but it's just the way they've expressed it that,
yeah,
caused
yeah,
offence. So if the intention behind the words is positive,
yeah,
then there's something to
yeah.
work on, isn't it? If they don't even see that they've done anything wrong and they get arsy about it, well, then it's a completely different thing.
Yeah. Definitely, and I think you get a sense of that really
Yeah,
quickly. And
yeah.
so that would be my advice:
Yeah.
is to, if you're in a position to influence, you'd have that conversation, because that again starts to move it forward. That's not acceptable. If you're not in that position, and you're nervous about doing it, I think it's that going through those mechanisms, going and speaking to somebody you trust, having conversations with someone, because sometimes being an upstander isn't in that moment. You could see something or hear something and then go afterwards and say to someone, are you okay? I'm not, you know how did that feel for you? I wasn't really clear about what your response was to that. It felt a bit inappropriate. Are you okay? That can sometimes just help somebody to open up. um, or then certainly here where I work, I'd be supporting people to go to a line manager, and I want to know about it, essentially, because that's the only way you change culture, is to just constantly be vigilant and be on it. And I think you also got to give people an opportunity to say their piece. So we talk about, don't we, being inclusive, but then it's like, oh, we're inclusive, but then somebody says something you don't like, and all the shutters come down, and it's like, but actually, sometimes you've got to be prepared to hear things that you might feel uncomfortable about, or initially you have a reaction to, and just sort of step back and let people have that cathartic release, and
Suppose
whatever that brings.
what I'm kind of gleaming from that is, you know what? Don't go in there like a bull in a china shop and
No,
cut someone off, because actually that just normally flares it up a bit even more in
yeah,
some way, shape, or form. But actually, to start a bit of a curious conversation to go,
yeah,
when you said that, what did you mean, or what was
yeah,
your intention?
yeah,
Did you get a sense of how that landed with
Yeah.
Sarah when
yeah,
you said it?
yeah,
Yeah.
And because
Yeah.
I
yeah,
noticed that she reacted like this, and
Mhm.
and I spoke to her afterwards, and yeah, she was a little bit unsettled by
Mhm.
that comment.
Mm.
Can you see how she would feel like that? Is
Mhm.
that what you kind of suggesting that conversation would be like?
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely so. And I think that's the big thing with big institutions like the police. The fundamental thing is you've got to be open to feedback and have humility. Because if you've got those qualities,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can reflect and learn, can't you? But if you're not hardwired for a bit of feedback and to be humble and accept that you might have got something wrong or you could learn from something, that is the problem, really. Because I don't think any of us get it right, do we?
Oh God, no, we're
They
not. None of
say
us
things.
are perfect, are we? I'm really interested as to what the temperature feels like for men in the police at the moment, because we've had several conversations with women in other organisations who are concerned that the men are feeling a bit attacked or
Yeah.
isolated or excluded, or feeling like it's like I don't fit in. It's all
Well, they don't matter
they don't
anymore.
matter. So how what's the temperature like in the police in terms of the men?
Yeah, I think there is a bit of that. I think the first response is, well, I'm not like those people that are in the news. That's not me. Um, and and the vast majority of people aren't. It's a really
Yeah.
tiny
Yeah.
percentage, and I think so that's the first sort of instinctive a feeling. I think I've got a male who works with me around violence against women and girls, and we felt it was really important that men and women should be working on this together in the police. So it's not seen as a women's issues;
Yeah.
it's seen as a societal issue, and men and women are part of the solution. But I do think men do feel a bruise, and that's why I'm saying you're not going to solve this overnight. There's
No.
certain things the police need to do overnight, and get their house in order, which we're doing in terms of how we identify anything that could be remotely like this. But I think the longer term piece is, how do you change people's beliefs around women and men, and that's a longer term piece, isn't it? Which you're doing a brilliant job at.
One girl at a time.
One girl at a time.
One girl at a time. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it is. It's a societal thing, isn't it? And it just reflects in every organisation differently. And I suppose the spotlight's on you more because people are hoping that you're going to fix it, aren't they?
Yeah.
Ridiculous. So, but they think that you're the place where it gets fixed, and that's not necessarily true, is it?
I'd love to see your type of work with boys in school, and I really would love to see that mirrored with boys about their own identity, what it's like to be a male and relationships with female. That's where it's got to come together.
I mean, there are lots of organisations that are working with boys doing that. I mean, they're not going to do the same stuff that we do, but then the boys don't need a lot of the stuff that we do. They want to be working with men. They don't want women. So I think that, and I've always said that if there's any organisations out there that work with boys, or, anybody that wants to set up something for boys, we're more than happy to support them. We do support some men that go into schools, but we are also looking at an anti-manifesto, an anti-misogyny manifesto to put into schools next term. And as part of that, we will be working with boys. But we're working with them because we recognise that we can't ignore the way that's impacting the girls.
Yeah.
So we need to put them together and say, okay, boys, you go off with this guy to talk about this, and you come up with us, and then we'll have these conversations, and we'll put you back together, and it's what you learned about each other and how you're now going to interact. So it's that. So that we are doing that from next term.
Brilliant.
But will we be doing Boys Out Loud anytime soon? No. No, it's not what we're passionate about. It's like, we're about equity. We're about making sure the girls have got the equity to equality with the boys, and we're a long way off that.
Well, maybe when the day arrives that we get there.
Absolutely. It won't be in our lifetime. Maybe but, our daughters or whatever. Or some of our little sisters, who will pick up in their lifetime, they'll be picking up that baton.
Yeah.
We're just trying to get of equity. That's what we're doing.
Definitely, and I think when you come into a job that's male dominated, what is really interesting, I think, is how men and women define what's male and female as well. And you sometimes sort of see it's a very there's a physicality to policing, I think, the very nature of it. And it's really interesting as to what you define as a typical male female, and potentially how females might try and morph and take on more typical masculine behaviours to fit in. So I think there's a lot of subtle things that need to be done to say, actually, you can just be yourself. Whatever that is for you, being female, that you can be that and still really be good at your job. So I think some of that
family liaison.
Yeah.
You don't just have to be the family liaison officer.
They were always just on the front desk.
On the front desk, yeah.
I love the bill. I used to love the bill. On gold.
For me, Sarah Lancashire changed all that. She changed the whole way women look at police in Happy Valley, didn't she? Did you watch Happy Valley?
Oh God, yeah.
She changed the game for me. She changed the game for me. I absolutely love the show. She changed the game. So really, Nicky, keep doing what you're doing. We love you. You think you're amazing. And a lot of the women that work for you are also amazing. Seen lots of them, had conversations with lots of them. So if we get more of you, and we get more women in the police, then we're going to change it. We're going to change it, definitely.
Definitely, and I love the fact that we're working with you and Little Sisters in school, because I think sometimes young girls aren't necessarily exposed to the police, and
they are, but for the wrong reasons.
Or for the wrong reasons. Yeah, we hope that's not the case. But I just think it's nice for us for girls to perhaps see this as maybe a career in the future.
You get excited, don't they, when we bring you in? Like when you
my God,
role model relay. I remember not so long ago when some of your team were on their role model relay. And they let the girls have a go at putting the vest on and trying to run in it. They were all running up and down the sports hall in a police vest, going, "Oh my God, this is so heavy!"
Yeah. And they love dressing up. love dressing up, don't they? And you're right, though, they get a completely different view because their view is, well, they probably don't see many police women to start off with.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
the police is it's male, so
yeah.
it's kind even detectives, it's male because that's all they see on the telly, in the
Well,
review and so on.
I was laughing with my little sister the other day because it's been glorious weather, hasn't it? And I went into school and I was going in between meetings, so I was in my uniform, and halfway through she she was moaning, bless her, saying, "Oh, it's so hot, miss, and I hate wearing my uniform." And I said, "Look at me." I said, I said, "Me and you are the same. I'm
Yeah,
sat in mine."
mine,
And everyone was floating around
yeah.
in lovely summer
Summer
clothes. So we were both
dresses, you
sat
know.
there. Yeah, we were bonding over the
Yes,
fact that we didn't
yeah,
think it was fair.
yeah, yeah. Bless, bless.
Oh, it's been
Cool.
lovely to talk to you,
Yeah,
Nikki.
it
And I
has.
guess, we love to leave all our listeners with what they can do to make a difference. And I think having that conversation around how you can call it out differently to get a bit of a different reaction
Yeah.
is definitely food for thought
Yeah.
for anybody.
Yeah,
It doesn't
and
matter who
support
you
other
are.
people.
Yeah,
So it may not necessarily be.
for
What did
you.
you call it? An upstander? Did you
An
call
upstanding
an
behaviour.
an
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Somebody that comes in that even if you as an upstander don't feel that you can call it out in the moment,
yeah,
and we've got to respect people
yes,
for all sorts of reasons why they can't.
yeah,
The fact that you're an upstander, you're going to go and speak to somebody afterwards and say, "Are you okay? Do you want to talk?" Even that helps somebody perhaps to think
yeah.
about, am I going to say something? And it, like I say, what you promote, you permit.
That's a really important point because actually sometimes you go out of a situation, you think, well, I missed the moment. I can't do anything now.
Yeah,
That's not true, is it? It's not.
yeah. It's not. No, it's not. And it's about finding the right space for you, isn't it? But you've got to create those spaces. That's what we've got to do. You do it, and we've all got to do it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, and mine. Thank you for being your first guest.
Yay.
Take care, ladies.
You have been listening to Jane and Jodes on One. Until next time, remember, sisterhood matters. Together, we are bold, brave, fierce, and unstoppable.